This is Barry Zalma speaking for Claim School Incorporated with another true crime of insurance fraud video. This one entitled Fire, Why Arson-for-Profit is Dangerous. It is video number 78 of the true crime stories of insurance fraud. The crime of arson is violent. Not only is property damaged, people die. Most arson fires are set for spite, anger, vengeance, or spousal abuse. Approximately 25% are set to defraud insurers. Fires set to defraud an insurer are called by arson investigators an arson-for-profit. Because most perpetrators do not understand uncontrolled fires, they believe arson is simple and risk-free. The nascent arsonist believes all the evidence that might tie him to the crime will be consumed by the fire. He or she, of course, is mistaken. Ben Standish was an arsonist who might have tried a less violent crime if he knew more about fire. Had he known that evidence will remain after the fire is extinguished by the firefighters, his house would not be a charred hulk today. Had he known that it is difficult to avoid injury, he would have filed a personal bankruptcy rather than use arson as a method to get out of debt. Ben Standish was upside down on his mortgage, and a balloon payment was due. The value of his house had decreased $200,000. He could not find a lender willing to lend him enough to cover the balloon payment, which was $100,000 more than the fair market value of the house. He was desperate. Ben decided that his only solution was to burn down his house and sell it to his insurance company. An honest man, faced with the shame of bankruptcy, decided that defrauding an insurance company was not criminal. He had paid them premiums for 10 years with no claims. They owed him. Ben owned a shoe store. He was very successful and had no problem making the monthly payments on his $600,000 home loan. Ben Standish, however, was cash poor. He couldn't make up the difference between the amount a bank would lend and the amount he needed to pay the balloon payment. He had 3 weeks, and to his mind, no choice. A graduate of Venice High School, who had taken 2 business classes at Pasadena City College, Ben had no training, knowledge, or background in the activities and uses of fire or flammable liquids. Ben had seen a movie on television called Batteries Not Included, where a professional arsonist burned down an apartment building in the Bronx. Standish decided to emulate the person in the movie. A fire at his house would pay off the mortgage. His debt problem would be solved. He would then borrow the money needed to rebuild a house on the soon-to-be empty lot. Ben first sent his wife and children to visit her mother in Atlanta. He boarded his Rottweiler with a local veterinarian who was treating the dog for worms. His wife's cat and 3 hamsters kept by his children needed to die to make the fire look accidental. The day after his wife left for Atlanta, Ben rented under the name George Johnson a public storage unit approximately 12 feet by 10 feet. He carefully moved into that unit his jewelry, his wife's jewelry that she didn't take with her to Atlanta, a new Sony 60-inch plasma TV, a DVR and surround sound system, all the family DVDs, videotapes, photographs, and accounting records that would be impossible to replace, and he all moved them into that storage unit. When he was finished, the storage unit was full. He purchased a separate policy through the facility to cover more than $150,000 of valuable goods and all of the private papers and photographs of the family he had stored at the public storage unit. Friday afternoon, after closing his shoe store, Ben visited his local Shell service station and filled a 5-gallon can with gasoline. He went to the Payless drugstore and bought a package of balloons, and at the Ace Hardware store next to the Payless, he purchased a carpenter's staple gun. Finished shopping, Ben returned home. He pulled his Explorer into the garage, closed the door, and began carefully siphoning gasoline into the balloons. He filled 14 balloons with approximately 2 ounces of gasoline each, carefully tying knots in the ends and putting them to the side until he was ready to ignite the house. He was in no hurry. Ben planned on all his neighbors being asleep when the fire broke out, so that the report of the fire to the fire department would be late. For the next 2 hours, Ben stapled balloons containing gasoline to the ceiling in each room of his rambling ranch house. He did not know that it would reflect a high-burning fire and make the fire department think the fire was electrically started. Ben just did it because it seemed important to the arsonist in the movie. He emulated the fictional character. His memory of the film, however, was weak. He didn't think that the balloons of gasoline would be enough to destroy the house. Since there were still 2 gallons of gasoline left in the can, he began to pour gasoline on the floor in the bedrooms, living room, family room, and kitchen. Ben Standish put the plastic can down in the entryway, left the front door open while he pulled his Explorer out of the garage and closed the garage door. By the time Ben returned to the entrance to start the fire, all of the gasoline he had spread in the various rooms had turned to fumes. Ignorant of the volatile and explosive nature of gasoline vapors, he nonchalantly approached the front door with the calendar section of Monday's L.A. Times and an old Zippo lighter. He expected to light the paper, throw it into the hallway, watch the fire slowly begin to spread, and then walk away and drive down the hill to his store. He had, 20 minutes earlier, made an anonymous call to the police. Ben reported a burglary attempt at his shoe store, and when the police called him 10 minutes later, he pretended he was awakened from sleep. He told the police he would come to the store as soon as he washed and dressed. If anything was missing, he promised to call the police. When Ben turned the wheel on the Zippo to make the spark, the house suddenly exploded. Flames shot in and then back out the front door, singeing Ben's eyebrows and pushing him backwards onto his butt in the bed of begonias that lined his entrance walk. Lights went on around the neighborhood as his neighbors were awakened by the explosion. Ben pulled himself together, raced to his Explorer, and with the lights out, he drove down the hill. He entered the 405 freeway and drove to his store on Washington Boulevard in Culver City to meet the Culver City PD, who would be his alibi for the time of the fire. The fire department arrived at the scene of the fire within minutes. Streams of water were placed on the scene and the fire was extinguished. Because of the flash of the explosion, most of the balloons Ben had stapled to the ceilings remained intact. The firefighters, expecting a simple residential fire, sat down on the front steps and curb and shook with fear. They recognized that if one of those balloons had let loose, it would have caused an explosion that could have killed anyone or all of the firefighters. Their captain, so angry at the danger his men had faced, was almost speechless as he called for an arson unit to come to the scene of the fire. When Orson Campisi, firefighter and arson investigator, arrived at the scene, he was met by a very agitated fire captain who pulled Orson out of his car as if he were a small bag of tomatoes. "Orson," the captain shouted, pulling him within 2 inches of his face, "somebody almost blew up my entire company, and I want you to get him." "Calm down, Captain," Orson replied, extricating himself from the grasp of the captain. "Let me get to the trunk of my car, put on my turnouts, and see what I can see." The captain, who had allowed his anger to fester while waiting for Campisi to arrive, after the outburst immediately calmed down as he waited for Campisi to dress in his heavy firefighting gear and helmet. "It's okay, Arson, I'm calmed down now, but the son of a bitch hung balloons full of gasoline all over the ceiling. If we didn't have the fire out immediately, we would have had dead firefighters here on the grass. You've got to get the person who did this fire." "Have you done any overhaul, Captain?" "No. As soon as the fire was out and no longer a danger to the rest of the neighborhood, I had the firefighters stand down and set up a security perimeter. No one has been in the house but the firefighters." Campisi grabbed his camera and slung it over his shoulder, pulled a shovel and a broom from his car trunk, and walked into the house. He propped the shovel and broom against the frame of the entry door and entered the house. Campisi was thankful that the sun had just crested the hills to the east of the house and visibility was good. He walked carefully through each room, making certain he disturbed none of the scene, generating a map in his mind of the photographs he would take to memorialize the scene. He saw toy balloons with the incongruous phrase "Happy Birthday" emblazoned on each balloon in bright primary colors. Convinced that there was no doubt the fire had been intentionally, although not professionally, set, since the balloons were still intact, Campisi decided his best opportunity at an arrest was to gather evidence that might support an arrest for arson or insurance fraud. He knew after the scene investigation was completed, he would be occupied with dozens of hours of interviews with firefighters, neighbors, the owner of the house, and all its residents while waiting for the results of the crime lab. During his walkthrough of the scene, he found curled up behind a closet door a small black cat, and on the service porch 2 hamsters dead in their cage. The pets had apparently died of smoke inhalation, since they showed no evidence of fire damage. 4 hours later, Campisi had taken 72 photographs of the scene of the fire, collected 4 gasoline-filled balloons, 6 one-gallon cans of cloth and carpeting Campisi believed were soaked in gasoline, a small plastic package with a label stating that it contained 10 happy birthday balloons. The bar-coded price tag was still visible and showed the balloons were purchased from a Payless drugstore. The captain and 2 uniformed police officers stood next to the pumper, drinking from styrofoam cups what appeared to be coffee. As Campisi approached, they stood to attention, anxiously awaiting his arrival. Behind the yellow tape, there were 10 men in business suits holding clipboards. Campisi recognized them as solicitors for various firms of public insurance adjusters who seemed to appear at every fire scene. They were all talking to each other since the owner had yet to arrive. "Well?" the captain asked. "As was obvious to you, Captain," Campisi replied, "the fire was an arson. I think the person who set the fire was less than professional and probably got hurt in the fire. He tried to act like a professional, probably saw one in a movie or read a novel about arson, but didn't know enough how to get the fire to go. I need help from the PD." The senior officer introduced himself and, while shaking Campisi's hand, offered his assistance. "Please contact any hospital within 30 miles of this house for anyone reporting to the hospital with burns on his hands and face. Then find out where the owner of the house is and bring him here as soon as possible." "The owner has a shoe store down on Washington Boulevard. I sent a car there 4 hours ago on a burglary call, but they couldn't find anyone." "Was the owner called?" "Oh, of course. We called him here at the house, and he promised to respond. The store was secure, the alarm had reset itself, and it seemed secure. My officers left to investigate a 3-car accident before he arrived. I'll get on the radio and have a car go to the store to see if he's there. If he is, we'll have him here in 20 minutes. "Great," Campisi responded. "Is there any of that coffee left?" "Sure, we might as well drink it while we wait for the owner." A half hour and 3 cups of coffee later, Ben Standish was driven to the scene in a police car. He spotted the captain's white helmet and approached him agitated. "What happened?" he asked the captain. "Your house was set afire by an amateur arsonist." Campisi, rising from the fire truck's running board on which he was sitting, approached and asked, "Where were you at 2 a.m. this morning, sir?" Before he could answer, the public adjusters swarmed down on Standish, shouting that he needed their help to protect himself against the insurance company, who they said, without their help, would cheat Standish out of the rightful benefits of the policy. Campisi was furious. He needed to complete his interrogation. He waved to the uniformed police officers, who pushed the public adjusters behind the yellow tape in a wave from Standish and Campisi. "You can talk to them later if you want. You must talk to me, however, first." Standish, who appeared frightened as a result of the onslaught of the public adjusters, visibly calmed and responded to the original question. "I was at my store. My alarm company called to say they had a burglary alarm at my shoe store. I found some empty shelves and shoes on the floor. I was doing an inventory to see if anything was missing when these kind officers came to tell me I was needed in my house." "Someone set fire to your house," Campisi said. "Can you think of any reason why anyone would want to do that to you?" "No, I have no enemies. I sell shoes to people. The only complaints I ever get are that some tight shoes cause corns. Nothing that would make someone do something this evil to me." "Tell me, sir, what happened to your eyebrows? It seems you don't have any." "My eyebrows? What do my eyebrows have to do with anything? My house was burned down. What are you doing to catch the person who did it?" "I am doing what I must," Campisi responded. "What happened to your eyebrows?" "Nothing. I was born with very bushy eyebrows that almost met at the middle. My wife hated them, so I had them plucked out." "May I see your hands, sir?" "My hands? Why do you want to see my hands?" "Because since you arrived here, your hands have been stuffed in your pants pocket." "Please humor me. Take your hands out of your pockets and show them to me." Ben took his hands out of his pockets, held them out towards Campisi, and almost fell as his knees weakened and wobbled. "Mr. Standish, you are under arrest. I must inform you, you have the right to remain silent and refuse to answer any questions I pose to you. You have the right to have a lawyer present while I question you. Do you waive the rights I have just explained to you?" "Sure, I'll waive the rights. You've got me red-handed," he said, as Campisi inspected the red, blistered, and burned hands. "Captain, please ask one of the paramedics to come over and treat these burned hands while I speak with Mr. Standish." As the captain muttered into his portable radio, Campisi directed his attention to Ben. "So when you lit off the fire, it flashed back in your face, didn't it?" "Yes, sir." "And your hands had some gasoline on them and they caught on fire, right?" "You're right." "Was it painful?" "Yes, after I put the flames out on the grass, it was excruciating, like when you slam a car door on your hand, except it never stops." "I noticed a dog dish in the house, but no dog. Where's the dog?" "I had him stay at his vet's place. I couldn't hurt him. He's my best friend." "Who was the owner of the cat?" "My wife. I hated that nasty animal." "Well, he won't bother you again. He is quite dead." "Good. Why did you set fire to the house?" "I had no choice. The balloon payment was due and the value had dropped. I couldn't borrow enough to pay off the balloon. I needed the fire to pay off the loan." It didn't work. Why did you staple balloons to the ceiling?" "I saw it done in a movie, batteries not included, and it seemed to work real well." "Unfortunately for you," Campisi responded, "the fire department is very efficient. They put the fire out before the balloons blew up. By the way, did you buy the balloons at Payless?" "I bought them at the Thrifty in Culver City, which was just bought by the Payless chain." The paramedics had salved and bandaged Standish's hands while Campisi asked him his questions. He had enough information to take the case to the DA for prosecution of Standish for arson-for-profit, and attempted insurance fraud. He waved to the uniformed police officers. "Gentlemen, please put cuffs on this gentleman above the bandages and take him to the Culver City Police Department jail and book him for arson and attempted insurance fraud." Uniformed police officers led Standish away just as the captain came to stand at Campisi's side. "Thanks, Arson. That has to be the fastest arson arrest in my experience." "I don't think I've ever done one quicker either, Captain." Mr. Standish was obviously incompetent as an arsonist. "I knew when I walked through the house and found junk furniture, a dog dish, and no dog, that this was probably an arson-for-profit. When you check the Culver City Public Storage Outlet, I expect we'll find the real contents of the house. Amateurs always protect the pets and the things they find most valuable. They think a fire will leave nothing but ashes so they can claim anything they like. This idiot spread so much gasoline that the minute he lit a match, there was a flashover that set him on fire. He's lucky it didn't kill him. If all 5 gallons had turned to fumes, the explosion would be the same as 58 sticks of dynamite. When I saw his eyebrows were gone and he appeared to have a sunburn on one side of his face, I was sure he did it. He thought well on his feet and came up with an explanation for the eyebrows, but knew if I saw his hands that he had failed. That's why he confessed. And those vultures trying to sign him up will get nothing? Not really. They'll find the mortgage holder and sign it up. Even when we prove Standish burned down his house, his insurance company will still be required to pay the mortgage." "You're kidding. You mean if he goes to jail, he still succeeds in getting out of debt?" "Yep. And you thought crime doesn't pay." "Orson, I'll never say anything about my insurance company again." This video was adapted from my book, Insurance Fraud Costs Everyone, which is a supplement to my 2-volume treatise, Insurance Fraud 2nd Edition, all of which are available as Kindle books and paperbacks from Amazon.com. If you found this video to be interesting or useful, please, when you view it on Rumble, click on the Rumble button, and if you view it on YouTube, please click on the like button. Thank you for your attention, and please don't ever think that you can succeed at an arson-for-profit scheme. Thank you again.